first question is, how have you adjusted to your position since we last met?
It has been an adjustment. A lot of it has been just flipping my perspective. For the last 4 years, I've been an active participant in council meetings. I've spoken to council. I've been on some committees. I've attended a lot of meetings, but you're very much a passive observer of the mechanisms of local government when you're in the seat that I had been. And now as a council member, it's a lot more responsibility. So I think I've tried to approach it like I would any kind of first job experience, which is, pay attention, do, 90% of listening, and participate the other 10%, ask questions. Don't be shy, don't be intimidated. Understand that everyone's had a first job experience, so there's a learning curve. I tend to think that you really don't reach proficiency in a job until you've been there at least a year, when you can start looking back at things that have happened in the year previous. So I'm approaching this with a sort of open mind and a sort of open book mentality. But from a practical standpoint, there's been a lot of things that have carried over from my committee work that have hit the agenda for the City Council in the last couple of meetings. Some of the issues from the Historic Preservation District, which we're looking to form, we were able to put one of the city's properties, the White Pillars property, and make a recommendation that it get historic preservation protection status. So it was really good to feel very confident and comfortable in an issue because it had been carried over from some of my previous experience. And then on the other side, there's been things that are very new to me. So that's required some learning and investigation on my part. But all in all, to make a long-winded answer boiled down to a short soundbite, it's an adjustment, but it's been one that I've embraced.
I think that's amazing because you have taken those old experiences and now they've come back. It's kind of like as in the universe, kind of bringing the new and then another new experience to you.
Yes, and it very much, I've always seen that in my life, that, I've had lots of different jobs in several different fields, and you don't recognize it maybe in the moment, but usually, and in my experience it's been the case, something that you learned is going to translate to a skill in your next experience. You don't recognize it at the time, but when you get to that new place, you feel, something that I had done in the past has prepared me for this moment. So I'm very much in the same, wavelength as you in talking about that sort of, karmic, universal, destiny type of thing. So for sure, I can relate to that.
So the next question is, I have noticed that you like to be referred to as Andy instead of Mr. Bateman.
Yes.
Why did you make that choice?
It goes back a long time. I was in kindergarten filling out Valentine's, and I was writing Andrew, and I asked my mom, is there a shorter way for me to say this? And she said, yeah, Andy's actually a nickname for Andrew. So I started to become Andy at a very young age. Andrew is definitely my given name. I respond to that. That's something that my wife calls me, my mother calls me. It's a popular name. But I also want to establish more of a familiar first name basis with the folks that I interact with in regards to the city, because I think that's important. I don't want to create this sort of barrier, an artificial barrier of professionalism. Is important, but it shouldn't necessarily be something that's expected or I like to be as personable as and on a first name basis as with anyone.
Any pressure representing the youth in your council position?
I don't feel pressure, but I do feel a responsibility, and a lot of my interest in city council kind of stems from that, in the sense that as being the younger member of council, it's important that I can represent that viewpoint. But I'm not so young. I mean, you're pretty young, much younger than me. So I see it more as like a bridge. I feel a responsibility to be a bridge, to represent a lot of the values, of the folks that are older than me that I absolutely respect and that I've learned from in this process to help translate those values and those responsibilities to younger generations like yourself. I am born in the late 1970s, and demographically it's actually kind of a smaller chunk of the overall population. So I think we as late Gen Xers have a responsibility to kind of straddle those other larger generations that are both older and younger than us. We might not be the ones in power as currently. Most of those folks are typically in the older Gen X and baby boomer generations, and there'll be millennials and Gen Z folks that are coming up that are eager to take leadership positions. So likely this sandwich generation that we find ourselves in are going to have to be able to navigate both generational viewpoints. And so I think that's really important, and that's what I hope to bring. I don't necessarily want to represent a certain generation or a certain point of view, but if I can help to try to expand upon those sort of generational stereotypes into something that's a little bit more broad and a little bit more holistic, that would be a really good accomplishment, I think.
When I've mentioned your name to Loveland educators, for example, they have always been very happy to hear your name because they know that there will be a change for the council. I think they definitely believe in what you're doing, and they want some new change to happen to the council, and not just in education, but overall. And a lot of people have a lot of faith.
Well, I appreciate that. And being a Loveland High School graduate, it's encouraging to hear. There's, a handful of educators that are still there from when I was there, and I am the oldest, so I have a younger brother and a younger sister. So if they didn't have, or if I didn't have them, probably they had my brother or sister. So it's cool to see that kind of connection from my family that kind of still resonates with the folks that are living and breathing the Loveland Tigers mentality, that so much so that you mentioned that. So I appreciate that, and let them know that I think that they all provide a great service and a commendable responsibility to teach our children, and I'm a good example of what happens with the Loveland High School education.
Of course, I will definitely tell them. So when choosing between solving issues, we've talked about the white pillars. Do you favor trying to solve more economic or social issues?
I think social issues are difficult to tackle from a local, municipal standpoint. However, one of the boards I serve on is the Claremont County Board of Mental Health and Recovery, and so a lot of what we do is helping to fund programs that work towards children's services and addiction and mental health and recovery. So when it comes to attacking social problems, I guess, I have that avenue and some of that opportunity to see how those programs get funded. So that's kind of a hybrid of what you're speaking about from economic and social. When it comes to the city, I think I'll give you a classic both answer, because when we talk about social issues in regards to the city, I think we're really talking about quality of life, we're talking about standard of living, we're talking about amenities that the government can provide its residents, less so than we're talking about some of the big national social issues that you see going on and playing out in the media. But all of those quality of life, standard of living issues have a price tag. They have to be financed somehow. And so I really am appreciating learning the sort of balancing act and the dichotomy of those things, where if you want to enact change in the city, you have to understand how you're going to fund it. You have to understand what are the mechanisms in place currently that can help support that. What are some available funding tools that you can use from grants and other types of services like that. So, again, I'm new to this, and if I had my preference to pick A or B, I would say, let's find ways to enhance Loveland's quality of life without having any kind of financial burden. Finding sort of easy wins, I guess you could say, things that are no-brainers that we should be able to do that's not going to cause any kind of financial hardship on anyone.
I think definitely with when you said the hybrid, I think that's perfect for what Loveland needs to come and to strive for, to continue to strive for, and to continue to receive those type of responsibilities to be made and done.
Mm-hmm.
So people are very thrilled to have you on the board due to your optimistic views and your change-seeking outlook. If you could implement a new rule or regulation today towards our city, our schools, or our parks, what would it be? Just your kind of like your choice.
You mean one of those categories? Parks, schools?
Anything.
I mean, I am a big proponent of the sort of natural environment appeal that Loveland has. I think that if we didn't have a river that ran through the city, we probably wouldn't have had a railroad that ran through the city, and then we wouldn't have the bike trail that runs through the city. So I think that those are some assets that absolutely need to be preserved, but also probably enhanced in some respect. And that can be in simple ways like raising awareness of the different parks and trails and sort of outdoor recreation opportunities beyond the bike trail and the river. So I would like to do more to help promote that. To get a little bit more of a spotlight on the outdoor recreation opportunities that exist in Loveland. I think that the city could do more to promote hiking in some of the green spaces that are available to us. I live right by the East Loveland Nature Preserve, and they recently built a bridge that connected the parking lot with the nature preserve, and it opened up a lot more visibility to that space. Now, my wife and I were lamenting the downside of that progress is that, well, now we don't have this neat nature trail to ourselves. It's not our little private oasis, but that's not really what it's about. It's about allowing the city's residents and visitors to the city to sort of take advantage of all of these amenities that we have to offer. So I would like to address some more of those things from a promotion and awareness building, but also from a preservation standpoint, and to try to understand, how can we keep Loveland, beautiful, keep Loveland attractive, keep Loveland to be, this sort of outdoor paradise for folks during the summer, and maybe explore opportunities for the winter. Is there a trail for, it doesn't snow so much here, but like I've got a friend that lives up in Cleveland area, and they are really into snowshoeing. My brother lives in Colorado. So these are some other opportunities to sort of enhance our image beyond just what everybody knows us for, the Loveland Bike Trail, go on a canoe trip. So I'm really fascinated with that, but also, like I said, the sort of the preservation and the protection of that, and understanding what we need to do to make sure that we aren't, developing over our green space. So I think that's important too.
Can Loveland be called a perfect city?
Can Loveland be called a perfect city? I mean, I don't think there's such a thing as perfection on this earth, unless you see, true wilderness or, unspoiled by human hands, that you might be coming close to perfection. But I think that we can strive for perfection, and I think that that's what we should be aiming for, to be more perfect. And so I think that my answer is no. It's not perfect. And I think from a political standpoint, you're never going to be perfect, because perfection in many respects is subjective. So what could be perfect for one group is not to another. But finding those elements to compromise to help people get to a point where they are working together to try to better the city's image, or the city's offerings, or the city's footprint or tax base, or whatever you might be attempting, that it has to be done collectively and collaboratively as much as possible. And that involves, communication to the residents on a broad level. It involves two-way communication, understanding what the feedback mechanisms are, so that they can give us input on what they like, what they don't like, what's working, what's not. But you're only going to reach perfection if you acknowledge that it's a work in progress and it's never ending. What we develop in this 4-year term is going to lay the groundwork for future generations to add on top of, to build, to redevelop, to redesign. And so you have to kind of all row in the same direction as a council to get to that point, and as staff and as residents, which is not an easy task, but it's something that I think is the goal or the ideal. So when you talk about perfection, you know, that's what comes to mind for me.
And that's it.
Oh, that was it?
Yes, 6 questions.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be interviewed by Loveland Magazine and a student such as yourself. I really appreciate the opportunity.